welcome everyone to our opening plenary on new views on mental health. Thank you for being here with us. Our hope is that this plenary will be a natural transition from the grounding practice that we just shared with Bhaskar and Vinod, and that a lot of the knowledge that you'll get from this session will be carried throughout the rest of this summit. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Haley Hetchman, the moderator for today's panel, as well as all the other panelists for our new views on mental health. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much. Looking forward to our conversation today. Before we get started, I just want to acknowledge that I am joining you today from Montreal, the traditional territory of many nations, including the Kanakaka of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Huron-Wendat, Habenaki, and Anishinaabeg people, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. I want to share not only the importance of recognizing the traditional owners of this land, but also the essential nature of uplifting Indigenous voices and working with our communities towards reconciliation that is based in truth, dignity, and respect. So thank you everyone for joining us today for this exciting conversation centered on new views of mental health. My name is Haley Heckman. I'm the Executive Director of Unsinkable, a national charity founded by Olympian Silken Lawman that harnesses the power of storytelling to bridge the gap between those struggling with their mental health and steps towards mental well-being. I am thrilled to be joining you today as your moderator, both because I have been working in the social impact sector for over a decade and am keenly aware of the importance of shifting our conversations and approaches towards the mental well-being of our teams, while simultaneously acknowledging the continuous efforts that we are all collectively making to address the well-being in our communities. And because I have on many occasions shared my own personal mental health story to encourage other leaders to model this practice and enhance safety for the workplace that they're in as well. So to get us started with our vibrant conversation this morning, we will start with a lightning round of introductions to each of our panelists, giving each of them an opportunity to introduce who they are, where they are from, and their connection to the mental health space. So I will hand it over to Asante to kick us off.
Cool. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you everyone for being here. My name is Asante Houghton, pronouns he, him. Coming to you all from downtown Toronto, traditional territory of the Wendat peoples, the Haudenosaunee. See if I can do this off the top of my head, the Anishinaabe, and also, man, I rehearsed this. Anyway, there's one that I'm forgetting. My sincere apologies. But yeah, anyway, I'm now the manager of storytelling at Unsinkable. So I am very happy about that. New journey, new chapter for me. I do a whole bunch of things. I advocate. I've done a couple TEDx talks. I write. I tell stories. Anyway, I'll leave it there. We'll find out the rest. And Haley, I'll swing it back to you for the next person.
Thank you. So Hala, we'd love for you to introduce yourself.
Awesome. So hi, everyone. My name is Hala Arafe. I work as part of the McMaster Social Impact Hub as an analyst. I'm also pretty engaged in the equity, diversity, and inclusion space, as well as well-being, because I do work on some strategy work within the Treasury Board Secretariat. So I am currently in Hamilton at McMaster University. I'm finishing up my final year. And I'd like to just pay respects to the land, which is situated on the traditional land of the Mississaugas of the Credit and Haudenosaunee nations within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. I'm really excited to be here today. I'm just really here to listen, learn, and reflect, and hopefully share some experiences of my own. I really engaged within the social impact and mental wellness just when I first joined my undergraduate degree as part of the Integrated Business and Humanities program, and I got to minor in community engagement, and that was my first time having a professor expose me to just the works of self-compassion and non-clinical work, and that was, a spark lit up in me. So I'm really excited to be here, and I'm really excited to be a part of this community and to really just get to learn and share. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Hala. And Megan, handing it over to
you. I am in really good company today, and I'm really grateful for that. I'm so excited to be a part of this. I am Megan Rafuse. I am, pronouns are she, her. I am a social worker by background. I come to you with an undergrad in psychology, bachelor in social work, actually Indigenous social work from Lakehead. And then I also completed my master's in social work at U of T. But more important than that, I have the privilege of being the co-founder and CEO of Canada's leading online mental health practice called Shift Collab. We support individuals all across the country in dealing with their mental health challenges. And I'm a big proponent of workplace mental health, not only because I see the impacts within my own company, and it's my job as a leader to be mindful of how I shape the mental health in my workplace, but also because many of our clients come to us wanting more, wanting better, and wanting more appropriate accommodations and solutions for their own mental health in the workplace. I am so grateful to be here and look forward to learning and discussing and sharing today.
Great, thank you. So our first question is for all three panelists. So we are here to talk about non-stigmatizing, strength-based approaches to mental well-being. So I'd love to hear from each of you what you feel have been the most impactful and authentic approaches that you've seen to mental wellness at work. So who wants to kick us off?
I can go.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so like I shared before, my role within the Treasury Board Secretariat is I work on a lot of diversity, equity, and inclusion and mental well-being projects. And we do have a mental wellness working committee. And one of the biggest initiatives I think that had the biggest impact was we increased access to mental health first aid training to all our employees, no matter what role you took on. And it was just a one-day training. It wasn't anything too extensive, but I think that really pushed forward mental wellness at work, because I think a lot of the time with difficult conversations, because mental health and mental wellness is difficult, it's a part of our day-to-days, is that we think, you have to be an expert to engage in those conversations, or to feel the pressure to feel like you have to say the right things or do the right things to support someone. And I think giving access to that training, no matter what role, kind of took away that formalized component of it and just said, we're all humans at work first, no matter what our title is. And we all get to have the privilege in engaging with each other, and we all deserve to have the tools that we need to be able to engage with each other and make sure that we're supporting a safe space. So I really just think empowering others to be able to have access to that information and those tools just at work within their day-to-day conversations, whether it's a manager having one-on-one conversations with their team or just colleagues talking to each other, just helps strip the scariness of it, of feeling like it's only say someone that is in a formalized role that can talk about mental wellness or mental health or support someone or be there for someone.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Hala.
Yeah, when I think about this question, I think about, the various masks that, we wear in our world. And we all have different ones, masks that we wear with our family, masks we wear with our friends, and masks that we wear at work, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think about, what is sort of, the mask we've been conditioned to wear at work and how that supports or doesn't support mental wellness. And I think, and, sometimes, sort of the way we think about the workplace and professionalism can be a deterrence to folks feeling, or being, creating an environment where folks can really be at their optimal mental wellness at work within the workplace. And I think that really stems from, folks not feeling safe sometimes to bring, various parts of themselves into the workplace. And I was very lucky early in my career to have a boss who was, I don't know if she was ever coached to do this, but she brought every aspect of herself to work. And I saw the positive aspect that had on the team. And me just fresh out of university, not really understanding, this is my first job, how I should be in the workplace. It was kind of cool to have a boss that would, show up with music blaring, out of her car and, just talking about what's going on in her personal life and just really being herself at work, but also being really good at the work. So seeing that you could bring yourself to work while also being an expert in the thing that you're doing, while also being a terrific supervisor and all these other pieces. So it really changed my view immediately of, the kinds of space we can create at work. And I've tried to take that into, the various, roles I've had as a supervisor, program manager, et cetera, and I find it's been useful to help people feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thanks, Asante.
I love that you mentioned the masking aspect, because I think, when we're entering into the workplace, it's really important that people in our workplace, especially the leaders, are able to model what it actually means to show up and bring your full self to work. There's a lot of these conversations, there's a lot of buzzwords, there's a lot of values and, playbooks that come with joining a workplace. But what happens is we don't often, or always, I'll say, I won't use, all or nothings, but we don't always see the actionable strategies that come along with these promises. And so we know that psychological safety in the workplace is really important. It's that sense of being able to express your needs, speak up, make mistakes, ask for help without fearing negative consequences. And so when I think of some of the best workplaces I've been a part of, and a workplace that I aspire to build, is one where we allow individuals to bring their whole selves to work. And with that, it means we have to allow individuals to be part of creating the values and the strategies and the employee resource groups and all of the things that we know actually will help us champion our own mental wellness at work. For leaders, it's really important to lead with authenticity. I love what Hala said, where, I am a clinician and I am still not the expert in everything that everyone is experiencing. And we should stop as leaders putting the expectation on ourselves that if we open up a dialogue about mental wellness or mental health, suddenly we have to play therapist. And that's not accurate. What we have to do is say, actually, I don't know how to support this yet, but I see you, I hear you, I have your back. Maybe I've built some skills. Maybe I've been to mental health first aid. Maybe I have, external supports I know who to go to, and I am going to get you the help that you need. And this is what it can look like. And it's okay to not know. There's lots of things that come with leadership that there's no playbook. We don't know. And so I really love when employers and leaders come into the conversation with that humility to really think through, how does our culture within our workplace support what we're promising? How does it support what we want to see? And honestly, we know that organizations who have mental health strategies within the workplace have way better return on investment in many factors. And so just like we have a strategy of how we're going to grow, who we're going to hire, how our company is going to make more money or have more impact, we also need a mental health strategy that is built on the same terms. And so, I think the most authentic approaches have been the ones that I have seen as most successful. And just following up, I forgot to do my land acknowledgement, but I want to acknowledge that I too am in Hamilton, luckily sharing this land with Hala right now. So just to put that out there.
Thanks, Megan. And, following up on that, next question is for you. You touched on this a little bit, but as a clinician specializing in workplace mental health, what recommendations do you have for employers who want to embed mental wellness authentically and accessibly into the workplace outside of traditional EAP? You already mentioned a strategy. Are there other things that we can do to make it feel authentic, the way that we're supporting mental wellness outside of the traditional practices in workplaces today?
And I love talking about this. I've been a clinician for 10 years. I've seen the industry change and I've seen workplaces change. And what we know to be true is mental health at work is no longer just dealt with outside of the workplace by an EAP. And so traditionally it was, oh, someone's struggling. Okay, go over here. Here's the EAP. We know that doesn't work. And I love seeing future generations and our change makers saying, we need more, we deserve better. We bring our full selves to work. We expect you to meet us where we're at. And so let's be honest, a lot of people don't also like their EAP. And so I think as a system, we need to start thinking about, what are we doing as employees, asking for, as employers and as leaders, that doesn't just check a box. We're not in box checking territory anymore. That has passed. We are in a territory where we recognize that our employees need a lot more from us. The world is in a place where we don't just get to separate work and home and, all of the stressors that our life puts on us, like inflation and conflict and all of the struggles we're facing right now. And so an organization's mental health strategy should work hand in hand with its overall business strategy. It is critical to dedicate OKRs or KPIs specific to employee mental health. There's been a lot of research you can pull up on your own. There's a really good white paper out from CMHA. Deloitte did a lot of research around this, which I love. And we know that the return on investment is twofold. So one, we have less absenteeism, we have less time off work, we have less turnaround, for employees. We want our teams to be healthy. We want our colleagues to stick around and not experience burnout and have to leave as a result of their work. And so what I always suggest is, if you're in an organization and you're like, hey, I'm really struggling with our mental health strategy, think through, what are we doing within our culture and value set to really be genuine, explicit, evidence-based, and allow our values to drive our culture. So, do our values and our culture codes still align? Are we demonstrating those values and principles? How are we having conversations with our coworkers about what we say we value? Are we celebrating when colleagues are meeting those values? Teams have to practice habits too. So as teams, how are we checking in on each other during huddles? My own team started doing a vibe check. What's your vibe today? There's no wrong vibe. We all, because then we know where we're meeting the person at. And so, I may, as your manager, be like, hey, I really need you to do this project. But if you're like having a tough day, I may say, here, let's do that tomorrow. Today, let's actually work on this. Or why don't you take the afternoon off? You need a wellness day. Same with pulse surveys. We can do them anonymously, training events that highlight mental health. So mental health first aid training. And finally, your workplace has to have clear policies in place that articulate how you deal with accommodations. They have to be free of bias. You have to think about, how do we maintain confidentiality, privacy? What training do managers need? What are our current process? Do they work? Are they following EDI principles? It's really thinking through your organization as a whole. And I know if you're an employee right now, you're like, yeah, but I don't know. What can I control there? And I want you to know that, this is where psychological safety comes into play. We say, I don't see us having a mental health strategy. I see a lot of colleagues off on stress leave. We do a lot of work that involves a lot of emotional labor. I would really like to see us do this. Here's the Deloitte paper. Can we follow up? And so actionable strategies are really important, and normalizing that, we all have mental wellness. Many of us at some point in our life will live with mental illness, and we bring that to work. So this is a responsibility that I take pretty seriously.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Megan. Those are some great points and great takeaways for both, employers who are looking to implement those strategies, and also, like you said, that call out to employees to say, here's some things I've heard. How can we implement this at work? So our next question is for Asante. So as someone who has worked in the social impact space and has a lot of experience in peer support, how have you seen non-clinical approaches impact the well-being of change makers? And what can those working in social impact learn from a non-clinical approach?
That's a great question. Before I address it, I just want to, say thank you to what Megan just said about the responsibility aspect. I think that oftentimes, employers, especially when we have EAP programs and things of that nature, there's sort of this idea that, well, we're providing with these resources, so it's not really up to us to try to create, a space that maybe doesn't lead you to needing EAP services. But anyway, for my question, so one of the things I didn't talk about in my intro while I was being nervous is, probably at this point, the hallmark of my career has been advocacy work I've done in Toronto, where I co-founded an organization called the Reach Out Response Network. And what we did was we advocated for the Toronto Community Crisis Service, which here in Toronto is the new 4th emergency service. So when you call 911, you have fire, ambulance, etc. Well, now there's a 4th service, the Toronto Community Crisis Service. And what that service will do is essentially, provide mobile crisis teams to folks who are experiencing a mental health / addictions crisis, rather than having, what the old option was, which was police showing up and them having a lot of options for support. So now you're going to get mental health workers on the scene, many of whom with lived experience, which was a big part of the puzzle for us in what we're advocating for. Which brings me to the question, change making. It's very difficult. It's time consuming. It's lonely. It's isolating. You might have a lot of cheerleaders, but you may not have a lot of folks around you who quite understand the journey that you are on. That was certainly the case for myself and my co-founder, as we were on this journey, advocating, talking to all the city councilors, politicians, representatives from the police force, the media. Almost every day it felt like there was just so much going on. And my co-founder was balancing their personal and professional life, and I was also balancing my personal and professional life. And so there was all this stuff happening, and it's easy to feel like you can get swallowed up in all of that. And so one of the things, within peer support, that is sort of a central tenet is this idea of community, and being with folks with lived experience that is somewhat similar to yours. So for change makers, as we navigate our work and the multiple aspects of our lives, I think it's really important to sort of, we talk about building teams, not just building a team for work, but building a team for health. Folks who will, be there to support you as you're on this journey. And even better, if these are folks who have walked a similar journey as you are walking. So other change makers or other leaders, or, other folks who sort of understand the things that happen behind the scenes. The fact that, you might hop on camera for a media interview, and outside of the frame your entire house is a mess, but within the frame, like, it looks great. So like these like little things that when you're in it you really understand. So to be able to take a bit of a peer support approach of creating a peer support circle for oneself as we move through these journeys of taking on huge challenges and navigating the difficulties that are associated with that, I find was really helpful for me. I had the blessings of an amazing co-founder, who at the time we were more colleagues and friends, and now we're best friends. So it's and through our networks, just kind of creating we're surrounded by people who are ambitious and sort of know what that means on a day-to-day level. And it's been really helpful for us to not just completely feel swallowed up by all the work, because it's really easy for that to happen. So you got to build a community.
Great, thank you so much, Asante. And I agree with you. I think there's such a need for communities of practice in this work, especially if you're in a role that feels, very isolated, or maybe you don't have a lot of colleagues, or we know, like, especially in small organization, you tend to be like a one person, one function, where there's no one else who's doing your job. It's just you. And so if you can find other people to connect with, bounce ideas off of, even vent to, I know for sure I have found that super helpful along my journey. So our next question is for Hala. So as a young changemaker yourself, having worked with organizations focused on students and the EDI landscape, what advice do you have for employers about how to meaningfully engage young staff in the development of mental well-being initiatives and programming at work?
Yeah, no, this is amazing. It's a really great question. I think one thing in terms of how I would like to kick it off around this question is just recognizing like what youth expect of employers today. My generation and younger generations now have a lot of access to information. And I think that access to information has given them maybe a different leg up than different generations, because they can teach themselves different things. And there's a bit of some self-sufficiency and connection that they get to find through different online platform channels. And having that expansive knowledge changes the expectation for how they view their work. I think I would say that a lot of the people, like youth, in terms of the conversations that we've been having, is that they feel overworked and undervalued, because a lot of the time employers might have set expectations around how youth are supposed to come into work, but that's completely changed because they're not acknowledging maybe how different generations have adopted different values. So like, say Gen Z, I can speak to my generation in terms of just even my experiences, my friends, and just the work that I've had, is that the expectation of coming into work is that work is just a facet of your life. It's not your whole life. And there's a higher expectation of that career balance with your life and integrating, a sense of purpose within the work that you do, rather than it just being, somewhere you come in, clock in, clock out, because we do spend a big chunk of our lives at work. And I think that within that, some things that I've noticed, even in terms of the work that has been really successful, is bridging the gap with having more transparent conversations. I think that there's, Megan was talking to this, Asante was talking about this, is that there's a really, I think, big gap around mental health literacy between my generation and coming into work around, just even habits of having conversations and feeling comfortable. Like my generation, we have social media. We want to share. We want to feel heard. We want to talk about these things. And I think, having spaces at work to be able to reflect about this and bring that into the work that we do and bring that into the spaces with, even management or within our teams helps diminish that gap around, feeling like we're going to be judged for holding on to this new experience that we've had now. I think another big component is, I think in terms of learning, there's a really big expectation for youth to, want to be a part of the fun things. We want to be a part of the social media campaigns, and we want to be a fun of, doing the TikToks and stuff. And I'm not saying that we don't. That's definitely a really great part that I think a lot of employers do give youth today access within their roles. But I think there's a step up in terms of having some access to the decision making around, what messages are being sent off through the employer, rather than, the youth just being the ones creating the content to send the message. And I think that's a really big component as well, is that a lot of the time we think that youth can take on more of the role of implementing, rather than, getting a seat at the table and getting to participate and having these experiences and ideas to share. And I've been really fortunate in the sense that when I even had my first job and I started off as a summer student, they had put me to be a lead on a project. And that was I was like, oh my God, why am I doing this? And it was around creating our mental health working committee. And the biggest component is that they recognize, with learning is mentorship. And that's the expectation now youth have coming into the workplace, is that, we want to make the decisions, we want to have a seat at the table, and we want to participate in not just implementing mental health initiatives, but deciding on what's important and what's not, and having those conversations and getting to share that. So I think, those two components are really crucial right now to be able to engage youth in the workplace.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. And I think there's more and more, hopefully, and continues to be more and more conversation around, taking a person-centered view on our work and really making sure that we're embedding the decision-making, the perspectives of the people who decisions are being made about and for, with the person and the group of people who the decision is being made with and for. So my next question is for all of you. So we all know that mental health is not linear, and that many people struggle with their mental health and are working through and with their mental health on a regular basis. So how do you see the nonlinear nature of mental health being acknowledged and supported in the workplace? And what advice do you have for leaders who want to encourage their teams to feel safe coming forward when they're living with an ongoing mental health need?
Yeah. I don't know, Hala, do you want to go first? I feel
No, jump in, go.
Okay. I have big feelings about this kind of stuff. People are not robots. And I guess what I mean by that is, we all have our good days and our bad days and our in between. And sometimes we have periods that are challenging for a variety of different reasons. Maybe, someone has a diagnosable mental illness. Maybe there's something happening in their life, maybe whatever it is. But I think sometimes, what happens with, leaders, a misstep is an expectation that the folks, the employees, the folks that we're leading, etc., should just, that they will be perfect all the time. When I say perfect, I mean in terms of mood and that sort of presentation, which is just not the reality. It's just not how anybody operates. And and I think what's really important for leaders is to reflect and to ask themselves, what are they like? It's a thing that I really try to do nowadays, kind of track my moods and my ebbs and flows throughout a month, and kind of see what is happening for me. There are days that are very productive for me, typically Mondays, and and then there are other days where are not as productive for me, which typically are a bit later in the week, right? About what's happening, in my, so it's sort of being able to see for yourself in a mirror that you're also not, at your optimal ability or capacity or whatever you want to call it. I don't even like those words, at all times. And I think when we're able to do that sort of, humility finding, so to speak, we're able to humanize the folks that we are supporting on our teams in a way that allows for us to be there for them. And I think another big piece is being the example. And that's something that, again, I learned from my first boss, is how to be an example of the environment I want to create. So if I'm trying to create a safe environment, I need to demonstrate safety with the team that I am working with before that safety can ever exist there. But I've said enough. Maybe Hala, Megan, you want to jump in?
Yeah. Megan, did you want to go?
Sure. I'm like nodding over here, I'm like a bobblehead, because I'm like, yes, I have so many thoughts. I love what you both said in your last answers, because, I think something that is critical to acknowledge, and I steal this quote from my friend Zach. He lives with cerebral palsy, and he told me, actually the quote was written by a woman who supports him. So I'm even more proud because it was said by a woman. But it is essentially, no one is self-made. Everyone is community made. And I think there's this assumption when we look at our leaders to think, oh my gosh, they have something about them that they figured this out. And that comes from generations of leaders not necessarily being authentic or honest about what it really means to lead. And I love that our generation, I'm a millennial, Gen Zs, we're like, no, this isn't real. No one functions alone and at optimal functioning at all times, nor should we. I live with ADHD. My co-founder lives with ADHD too. He is also my husband now. And so, I always say everybody comes into their workplace or places where they're engaging or leading or committees, etc., with their own lived experience, with their own experience of whether it's a diagnosable mental illness, whether it's challenges with our mental wellness, maybe we're grieving, maybe we're struggling. And it's important to remember that there are people who want to support you, and we need to rely on those people. We need to have the courage to ask for what we need and be upfront. And we need to practice setting boundaries when we need those boundaries. And so, I recognize, and I think it's really important that all leaders recognize, that mental wellness and mental illness is never linear. We live with both. We can live with one. We can use one to mitigate the other. And what we need to know is that just like learning a new skill is a process, living as a human is a process, and we will ebb and flow. And so it's about having honest conversations. It's about opening up and saying, hey, I see, every Thursday you're taking a wellness day. Is there something I can do to support you on Wednesdays or Monday, Tuesday that makes Thursdays a little easier for you? And starting to open up the conversation. I think, as Hala alluded to, there can be a lot of fear when we don't know that we have the skills, or we're like, oh, I'm not a professional, and we need to get over that. These authentic conversations are what build community. No one is an expert. Clinicians have communities too that we go to say, hey, how would you deal with this? And I think it's really important that we equip all leaders to be able to support the people we're leading in a way that drives authenticity, because that is what creates psychological safety. Hala.
No, I love that. Yeah, I feel like I have to just take it in because it was so amazing both of you were sharing. But I think my perspective kind of takes a look at it also in terms of just the structural process of accessing accommodations at work. I think from just based off of reflection, just based off of the work that I've done even at school as a student for requesting accommodations in a course or even at work, is that we have the expectation is that no one needs accommodations, and if you ask for it, it's an exception. And that means one moment has happened, you need to get accommodation for that one moment, and you get accommodation for that one moment. And then there's a whole process in terms of even sometimes having to feel like you have to prove that I need this accommodation, right? And that's at work and that's at school. And I think I really want to, shout out a really amazing professor that had kind of influenced a lot of my perspective around this is Dr. Karen Balcom, and the way that she had structured out a course for us and how she had talked to us about universal design. And that, when we look at how we embed certain policies or structures in place, we cannot fault the person that requires an accommodation because you created an inaccessible space for them to need that accommodation, to feel like they can come to work or get the support that they need. And I think one thing that she did was really great was that, even just as an example, every deadline that she had set for a coursework, you had 5 days as buffer time. Anytime that you needed to request an accommodation, you didn't have to give any confidential or personal information. You just had to, click this one box, even if you didn't want to have a conversation with her, or if you did, you could just set up time. And I feel like even at work is that you feel like, you have to make a case for needing that accommodation or for that needing that support. Whereas if we make it a part of the day-to-day, similar to how you were saying, or just even how do accommodation requests work at work? How does the process work? Is there any documentation? Is that intrusive to request for that documentation? Just being able to have those reflections, I think, is really important for leaders to take more notice of, because, setting the stage for psychological safety in your conversations and the day-to-day interactions is so crucial. But then are the structures in place at work to help accommodate that, to help support that, to help empower that? And I think, that really just sparks something I think is crucial for leaders to reflect about today.
I love that, Hala. I have to say quickly that I love that you're talking about, who built the system and who is the system really for. And, I have a team of 125 therapists at my company. We talk about this a lot, how, the most vulnerable are running around with these forms for accommodation, being like, oh, is it my therapist who fills it out? Is it my doctor? Who do I need to pay to fill it out? Yeah. And it just sets it up so that the system actually doesn't support the users who need it most. And so, I think it's really important that we start acknowledging and naming the systems that aren't working for us and, start demanding better. Is that form really working for the user who needs it, or is it working for the insurer who probably doesn't want to actually fund it? So we have some loopholes. Is it for other people who, will benefit financially from someone having to fill out this form? And so I think it's really important that you mention that, where we recognize what is working within the systems. Is there easier ways to do that? And naming those challenges so that we can start to demand better solutions.
Yeah. And I guess just as a final story, I was just going to say that I think one thing that even, I'm a student, I do get accommodation sometimes at school and just even at work, is that we expect that someone requiring the accommodation, like that's an exception. Like that is the one person, and the rule is that no one needs accommodations. So that if someone needs to do it, then that's like a special one-off event that occurs, rather than like we all need different types of accommodation and supports every single day. And that the rule should be the exception should be is that no one needs an accommodation. And I feel like that's just something that, I love that you kind of shined a light on as well, Megan.
Yeah, I mean, real quick, Hala, what you're talking about is equity, right? We all need different things to succeed based on what we bring to the table. Yeah. So hugely important to highlight. Megan, with what you said about demanding better, 100% on board with that idea. That's how, my co-founder and I were able to get this whole thing started in Toronto, the Toronto Community Crisis Service. And, when we first started it, the idea, everyone was like, not possible, can't do it. Why would these two young people even try to make change happen? And then we made change happen because we sort of just kept demanding. And so I think it's really important that, as leaders and change makers, a leader doesn't always need to have a title, is a thing I want to really emphasize. A leader can be someone who's just at the beginning or hadn't even started their career yet. But to demand and to demand different is really important. But it's also important, and Megan, you touched on this too, is to be able to conceptualize the problem in a way that is clear so that you can communicate it, and then also to conceptualize the solution in a way that's clear so that you can communicate and argue for it in a way that is, rational, and, more likely to bring you to the success that you're looking for. Anyway, Megan, I know we're taking up all your time, but Or sorry, Haley, I should say.
That was
No, I think that was great. And I really love, that all of you touched on just putting the onus on the environment, not on the person. Like at the end of the day, those structures that we've created around accommodation have centered this person needing to A, ask for help, B, address issues that maybe put them in an uncomfortable position where they need to speak to how the environment hasn't been supportive of them, versus thinking about how do we create built environments that are accessible. And that piece, Hala, that you mentioned around universal design, how do we really think through the lens of universal design to create spaces that are going to be supportive to everyone's needs? Because ultimately, when you think about accommodation, anything to do with making a space more accessible for someone makes it more accessible for everyone. Any of those changes facilitate a better workplace for anyone else in that workplace as well. So rather than thinking about exception, thinking about universality, I think is so important. So thank you all for sharing that. Our last question before we, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say one more thing, just in terms of also just around the structures, is that I think a lot of the time when we set those policies in place, it's because we want to be cognizant of like who's making use of it and the right people get access to it. But I think we don't think about also who are we keeping out when we set those structures in place. So just wanted to add in that little tidbit, but please go ahead, Haley. We are stealing your time.
No, it's your conversation, and I've just been eating it all up and really enjoying all of the nuggets of wisdom coming from the three of you. So our last question before we wrap up for today is, there's a lot of information and focus on the importance of self-care and work-life boundaries for workers. And this can be especially important when navigating change work, because many team members are investing a great deal of emotional labor, as was mentioned earlier. Are there ways that staff and employers can help address the individual wellness while also prioritizing social change and community impact? So do you have any of you have suggestions around that mix between supporting yourself and also the big picture community work that these organizations are doing across Canada?
Yeah, this one, all these topics are so important to me. I think we have to stop measuring productivity based on time invested and more on impact. I think there's this idea that, 40 hours and that's the standard, and, that must translate into some sort of impact. But, I think when we actually focus on, building things that are impactful, it's sometimes going to be 50 hours in 1 week, it's going to be 25 hours the next. But the importance is, are you producing something that is valuable for the folks that you're serving? And I think when we, have that lens, it allows us to have a lot more flexibility in how we get the work done, and being able to create these environments where folks can show up authentically. Folks can have great days where they get 10 hours of work done, or they have, not as great days where they only get a few hours of work done. But just being able to know that the true value is the impact that we can create, and not necessarily the amount of time that we spent to get there. And I think that shift will allow us to be able to just maybe be a little bit more gentler in how we create these boundaries between work and life, and allowing folks to show up in the best way possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll second that. I'll go quick, but the work we do to manage our own individual wellness has to align with the work we're doing to prioritize social change and impact. So as change makers, we're always the first to give of our time, energy, resources, and it's really important that we're mindful of, in order to be in this work long term and not burn out, I have to invest in taking care of myself. I have to prioritize my wellness in the same way that I would in all of the activities and emotional labor and energy I put into taking care of the work that I love so much. And so I always say, you come first. It's the airline analogy therapists love to use: put your mask on first, communicate your needs, focus on what you can control, ask for help when you need it, and remember that you are the one doing the work. And so you have to be sustainable. That's where you'll have your best impact.
I feel like, just as a last thought, just is around, and I talked about this earlier in a brain date today that I was helped, is that I think we have expectations for how things are supposed to be, especially within the impact and social change industry, that we think, we want to do all the things, we want to solve all the issues, and we want to be there. But within that, we have this kind of expectation hangover, where we like then say, oh, I'm actually human. And it's, I think, a very defeating experience that a lot of change makers speak to, but it doesn't have to be, because in essence, it's the reality of the way life works, is that we have limitations in things. And I think in recognizing that at work and also within yourself, is that, you know, those limitations aren't a fault, they're just the reality of things, helps, I guess, nurse the expectation hangover a little. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. So in closing, I just want to give a big thank you to our three remarkable panelists this morning, Asante, Hala, and Megan, for sharing your insights, your creative thinking, and most of all, for sharing your passions for creating inclusive, supportive, and strength-based spaces for those working in this sector. While we do a lot across organizations to promote well-being, it's essential that we turn the mirror on our own organizational cultures to ensure that we're modeling internally the type of world that we're trying to create across Canada through our efforts. So thank you all, and I will hand it back to Dwayne.
Thank you so much, Haley, Megan, Hala, and Asante, for that incredible opening plenary on new views on mental health. There was a lot there. There was so much. I felt like as I was listening to it, I was like thinking about my own approaches to mental health, my own approaches as a manager, my own approaches even within Future of Good. There's so much that we can break down, and I know that we'll get a chance to do that in our concurrent sessions today. Another thing I really want to highlight is the emphasis on organizational change and teams. This summit is designed intentionally to be a team experience, and it's designed to help you to connect with your teams, to ask your folks, what are the challenges that they face? What are the structures that need to be evaluated and reevaluated? How do we build universal accommodations and designs? Some of those same topics we were just speaking about. Later in this afternoon, there is a team reflection time built directly into the schedule. And we've also curated a team experience guide for all of your organizations to do this work. So we really encourage you to actually use the time in the summit today to have those conversations and walk away with really impactful actions that you can continue to take as your organization evolves and changes and looks to make a more well-being, human-centric experience for everyone. Now, something that I really want to take a moment to highlight is that this summit is not possible without not just you folks as members and teams and the people engaging, the amazing panelists and speakers, but without some of our partners who made this a reality. Some of our partners, we learned from cooperators, heard from cooperators yesterday, one of our biggest title sponsors for this event. We also have the Make Way Foundation, In Spirit Foundation, HR Interval through Imagine Canada, the Lawson Foundation, Foundation for Environmental Stewardship, and the Hamilton Community Foundation. Thank you so much for investing the time, energy, and resources into making this event possible for all of these change makers. You'll notice there's a lot of foundations on that list, and if you attended Voulet's keynote at the end of it, he talked about the impact that foundations can have in continuing to support and invest and really put the energy and the resources into the sector to make this change possible. And these are some great examples of organizations that are doing exactly that. And we talked about Team Experience Guide, we set the tone for the day, and we're getting ready to jump into our concurrent sessions. Those will start at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you do need a quick minute to grab a break, use the washroom, grab a snack, practice your wellness, or maybe do some of those breathing exercises that Bhaskar shared with us at the beginning, now's a great time to do that. After our concurrent sessions, we'll be jumping into our afternoon programming, which does include that team experience portion, as well as a Q&A and some closing keynotes. If you folks have any questions or concerns throughout the summit, a reminder that you can always email us at info@futureofgood.co. Thank you so much. Enjoy your concurrent sessions. We'll see you this afternoon.